It took me about 2 months to take my CBR from looking like this mess to looking like this respectable motorcycle. But almost 3 months later, it looks like this once again. Apparently, troubleshooting the small things takes even longer, mostly because I'm sick and tired of working on this bike now. I thought it was done. There's a check engine light that confused the hell out of me. I only half fixed the neck bearings, and now I have a coolant sensor that goes haywire and won't let the bike start up. So today we need to try and sort this out, because all I've wanted to do for the last 3 months is ride my R1 and CBR back to back to figure out which one I want to keep. So almost 3 months ago, I rode this 2018 CBR 1000RR for the first time after rebuilding it, and it was really satisfying. But the first issue was a check engine light. Now that's an issue that I have actually solved, but I'm embarrassed to say that it took quite a few weeks. Firstly, because I did it as a sort of side project on the weekend, so it took a lot longer, hence why it hasn't been in videos, and also because the problem wasn't what I thought it was. I thought the light was from that time that I cranked the bike over without any spark plugs or fuel to get oil out of the cylinders. Holy shit. So I thought all I had to do was clear the light and it would be gone forever. And that was when I learned the first cool thing about this Honda. Underneath the passenger seat here, you can see this red connector, and you can see that it also has 4 pins. Now, Honda will sell you plugs to connect into that, to connect a sequence of those pins to tell the bike to reset its check engine light. Obviously, I don't own any of those plugs, and I wasn't about to give Honda any more of my money after paying so much for a subframe. $1,900 for a silly piece of aluminium that you sit on. So when I heard that the stationery shop next door to Honda also sold those plugs, I went and bought some. They're called paper clips. But being Honda, it's not that simple. There's quite a sequence to it. But I want to show you because I found it interesting. So let me quickly reenact the check engine light for you. Okay, our other issue is even stopping us from recreating a check engine light. I hate Hondas. Nevertheless, here's the process to reset a check engine light. First, you bend Honda's proprietary tool into this shape and shove it into the connector to join the white and green wires. Then you turn the ignition on, and when the engine light flashes, you remove the paperclip and reinsert it into the same pins, which should get the light on the dash flashing again. Now, apparently you can reset the ECU by turning the bike off. Then with the paperclip still installed, you pin the throttle, switch the ignition on, and 5 seconds later, you can release the throttle. It's easier when the forks are installed, but now the next time you turn the bike on, the light will be gone. It seems like a pretty convoluted process, but I did it so many times that I actually got pretty fast at it. And it works. When you turn the ignition on after that, the check engine light is gone. However, when I started the engine, a few seconds later, the light would return, which meant that it wasn't me clearing the oil out of the cylinders that caused the light, it was something else. So this is when I learned about the other cool thing that this bike has. So within the menu system of the bike, I think it's under the service tab, there's another menu called DTC, or Diagnostic Trouble Codes. And when you have a check engine light and you go into this menu, it'll give you a number that tells you what the code is. Now, I know this isn't special. I've had my R1 give me codes at sort of the top of the display here, but I really like the idea of a menu because it keeps it nice and neat. Nice and OCD like you'd expect from Honda. So once I learned that DTC wasn't an STD and that it was actually the solution to my problem, I Googled the number that it gave me. I think the number that it gave me was 2, and Google told me that that was a map sensor error. At the time, I had no idea what a map sensor was. I thought I'd just put my bike into different maps if I wanted it faster or slower. But apparently a map sensor measures the air pressure within the airbox. So I made my way towards the airbox. So like I said, at the time, I had no idea what a map sensor was. The only sensor on the airbox that I knew about was this one, and I remember plugging it in. So I kind of assumed the worst, thought that the sensor was broken, that it got damaged in the accident and that I'd have to replace that, and you know the drill. So I fiddled with this one, reset the light, and the problem just persisted. Again, I'm embarrassed to say that when that didn't work, I gave up for a few weeks, but eventually I put my ego aside and looked at some diagrams and figured out where the map sensor actually is. It turns out it's underneath the airbox. In fact, I can pull the tube to it off right here. So the problem was that this tiny tube was not connected to the sensor here under the airbox that you can't even see. I obviously, when I took the airbox off, I unknowingly pulled this hose off. So when I put it back together, I didn't even know I had to put it back on. And this silly little thing was all my issues. So I plugged it back in and everything was perfect. So it was a quick and easy fix that I wasted a lot of time doing. But when you're learning to diagnose things and learning new things like map sensors, it takes a while, but it's not really time wasted, because next time I'll know what a map sensor is. So then I was able to ride it again and find the next problem or two.
This time I rode the bike, every time I went over a big bump, I noticed some play in the neck bearings.
At first, I just tightened everything up a bit tighter, hoping that would get rid of the play, but it didn't. So then I knew I had to take it apart like this to have a look, and I found this. The bottom bearing had a crack in it. Now, the top bearing did have a crack in it. We found that one and I did replace it, and I even inspected this one and I couldn't see any cracks in it. But there must have been a hairline crack in it, and then when I rode it, I made it worse, and then when I took it out, it completely fell apart into two pieces. Now in hindsight, this was stupid because I do have a replacement bearing. The only reason I didn't install it was because firstly, I didn't think this one was broken, and secondly, I don't have the tools to install it on the stem. But now we're gonna have to make a plan. And there we go, installed. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now we just have to get it back on the bike. But like I said, I am sick and tired of working on this thing. So I think I'm just gonna leave, and when I come back, it should be done. Except I think I have to leave this way. Well, that looks better. I'm glad I just went for a coffee and came back and it assembled itself. And it's not at all 4 days later. But the problem is that those bearings weren't the only issue when I took the bike for a ride. Now, that's actually me trying to recreate the issue to get video footage of it, but it didn't behave like it did the first time when I wasn't recording. So basically, the bike was running perfectly for about 5 minutes. It made it to the fuel station where I topped it up a little bit, and then it just wouldn't start for anything. The whole display was turning off and on again, flashing. It rebooted a few times. All the warning lights around the display were flashing and lighting up like a Christmas tree. And it was cranking over perfectly when you hit the starter, but it just wouldn't fire up. After letting it sit for a few minutes, I finally got it to start and quickly raced back to the workshop, hoping that it wouldn't die on me. And the whole way, the coolant sensor or the coolant temperature was going crazy. It would drop from about 50 degrees Celsius up to 130 degrees Celsius within like 2 seconds. Completely unrealistic. And the bike has new coolant in it. I know it is full, I know the reservoir is full, so it can't possibly actually be fluctuating like that. Now, if it wasn't for the display going crazy and it was just the coolant temp going crazy, I would have assumed that it was just a faulty coolant sensor. But I don't think a faulty coolant sensor would force the display to freak out like that. Now, the bike might have a safety measure where it won't let it start if the coolant temperature is really high, because you don't want to damage the engine. And at first, I thought that the battery was fine because after all, the bike is cranking. But after quite a lot of hunting around the internet, I eventually found a forum of guys experiencing the exact same issue that I had, which is always comforting. So obviously I assumed the worst. I thought that there was a damaged connector from the accident, something wasn't connected right, probably need a whole ECU, maybe a new engine, probably a turbo, you know the drill. But after reading the forum, and people actually took their bikes to Honda, and even Honda struggled to diagnose it, eventually after replacing a lot of sensors, they came to the conclusion that it was indeed the battery. So if that is the case, it's going to be a very quick and easy fix, at least I hope so. It's strange that there's enough battery power to crank the bike over, but not to start it. So I don't know if it's not got enough power to run fuel injectors, or I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I did try charging this battery and it still didn't help. Some people say that it just doesn't charge when the bike gets hot. It's this generation CBR issue. I really don't know, but I'm sick and tired of chasing my tail with it. So we're gonna try this and hope for the best. Now this is a pretty complicated install, so I'm not gonna show you guys so you don't get confused. 3 hours later, a lot of proprietary tools, and there it is. So this is a very cheap battery, but so is the one I got because it was all I could get on short notice. Apparently these batteries on these bikes only last around a year, which is ridiculous. And apparently I've been warned that the cheap one's only gonna last 6 months. So I apologize to whoever has this bike next. All in a day's work. You'll probably see me in the MotoGP paddock pretty soon. Okay, so the moments of truth. I've bought the R1 from home because I'm hoping I can finally take the CBR home. I haven't even put the tank cover on yet because if I have to go back in there, I'm sick and tired of stripping this thing. So let's give it a shot because last time it wouldn't even start. That's not a good sign. Starts. Okay, let's go. Okay, well, that didn't go to plan. Anyone want to buy a cheap Honda? Well, I'm back here, but let's just say I didn't ride back here. So things started well. You saw the bike fired up. The first half of the ride was really good. Everything went to plan. Even the coolant temperature was consistent. But then everything sort of fell apart. Somewhere along the lines, I accidentally unplugged my microphone, so you can't hear what I'm saying. If the bike is moving, there's just too much wind noise. And then I decided to do a cheeky pull. It went well. The bike was strong, it revved out, everything seemed good until I shut off. And a few seconds later, a check engine light appeared, and a few seconds after that, everything died. The display, the engine, it was dead, and I was stranded on the side of the road. My worst nightmare? Not really, it happens quite often. Well, my plan was to go to like a shopping center or something, so that if it did this, I could Uber home and get my truck. But now, I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I don't really want to leave a bike all by itself here. I mean, I'm sure everyone's lovely, but I just don't trust you guys. So we're back to square one, but I bought a multimeter, even though I'm terrible with power and electricity, so let's see how this goes.
I tried it again once the bike had cooled down, and still nothing, even after charging the battery for a few hours. I then checked the battery voltage, which seemed very low, but turns out I was just in the wrong mode, as I verified with my R1 as well. But when measured correctly, the voltage was spot on, so I went through all the fuses and relays to no avail. Until...
Okay, you are not going to believe this. So I went through all the fuses, they looked fine. I'm not really able to test these relays because you have to put power to them. And I already blew the fuse on this battery charger trying to do exactly that. So I was digging deeper, going to look at more connectors underneath the tank, took the tank off, when I noticed that this ground was loose. It was wiggling and I could turn the bolt with my fingers. Now this is one of the things that I actually disconnected when I installed this new subframe. So I don't know if I didn't tighten it up properly. I think I did, but obviously not tight enough, and it's wiggled loose. So now look at this. Can you believe it? All because of a silly little ground. I mean, I'm not 100% certain that that is the end of my issues, and I have a check engine light to reset once again, but as you know, I'm a professional at that now. But if that little thing was my problem, I'm going to be the happiest person in the world.
So off I went to break down again. I mean, test the bike again.
It's run brilliantly all the way here. Again, the coolant temperature is good, but this time It didn't die on me, except for now, but that was intentional. So now we're gonna try the next test, because previously, well, the first time it gave me an issue, it was to do when it was hot. It wouldn't start when the bike was hot. So we're gonna turn it off, leave it for a few seconds, and try it again. And hopefully this time it's properly fixed. The dash is on. The temperature is the same as when we turned it off. It's a good sign. No problems. The Honda is back. Okay, well, today went much more to plan. I honestly had no idea that a ground connection, an earth connection, was so important on a motorcycle, but electrics have never really been my thing. But next time, that's going to be one of the first things I checked. So you live and you learn. We also have new neck bearings, top and bottom now, without any play in it, much better, and no check engine light. So overall, I'd call it a success. But anyway, now we can finally get to the fun videos with the Honda, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Let me know if you would have solved this faster than I did, probably, and I'll see you on the next ride. I have to go put a tank cover back on now. It's going to be the easiest job of the week.